We often think of evil as something that arrives from the outside, an unfamiliar shadow creeping into our lives under the cover of darkness. But for the small, tight-knit community of Pocatello, Idaho, the illusion of safety was shattered from within. It is a town where neighbors know each other, where doors are left unlocked, and where children grow up side by side in the same classrooms. In the autumn of 2006, this quiet American landscape became the setting for a tragedy that would forever alter the lives of its residents and challenge our understanding of juvenile psychology. This is the story of Cassie Jo Stoddart, a bright and responsible 16-year-old girl whose life was taken in a meticulously planned act of betrayal by those she considered friends. It is a case that exposes the dark intersection of media obsession and true crime, demanding a profound examination of forensic science, police procedure, and the legal system's response to premeditated malice. Cassie Jo Stoddart was born in December of 1989. By all accounts, she was a beacon of light to her family and friends. A high school junior at Pocatello High School, Cassie was known for her maturity, her intelligence, and her unwavering sense of responsibility. She was a straight-A student who stayed away from trouble, preferring quiet evenings at home over the unpredictable parties of her peers. Her family remembers her as headstrong yet deeply compassionate, a young woman who easily earned the trust of everyone around her. It was this very reliability that led her aunt and uncle, Allison and Frank Contreras, to ask Cassie to house sit and care for their animals at their home on Whispering Cliffs Drive while they traveled out of town for the weekend. For Cassie, it was a simple favor for her family, an ordinary weekend of homework and relaxation. She had no way of knowing that her willingness to help would place her at the center of a chilling conspiracy. The evening of Friday, September 22, 2006, began quietly. Cassie invited her boyfriend Matt Beckham over to watch movies. Early in the evening, two of their classmates, Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik, stopped by the house. Cassie knew them well from school. They were typical teenagers who shared an interest in amateur filmmaking. The visit seemed casual and brief. After spending a short time at the house, Brian and Torey announced they were leaving to catch a movie at a local theater. However, before departing, one of the boys secretly unlocked the basement door, ensuring they would have unrestricted access to the house later that night. After Brian and Torey left, the atmosphere in the home began to shift. The electricity in the house suddenly went out, plunging the living room into darkness. The dogs began to growl, sensing an unfamiliar presence. Cassie and Matt were unsettled, but they assumed it was merely a power outage or a blown fuse. Matt contacted his mother to ask if he could spend the night, sensing Cassie's unease, but his mother declined the request and instead came to pick him up around 11 o'clock. Cassie, bound by her sense of duty to her aunt and uncle, chose to remain at the house. She locked the front door, believing she was securing herself against the outside world. But the threat was already inside. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik had never gone to the movie theater. Instead, they had waited outside, returning through the unlocked basement door. They deliberately manipulated the circuit breaker to frighten Cassie, a psychological tactic designed to isolate and disorient her. Once Matt departed, the two teenagers crept upstairs. The ensuing events represent a catastrophic failure of human empathy. Cassie sustained numerous fatal injuries caused by edged weapons. The attack was swift and entirely unprovoked. Forensic pathologists would later determine that she suffered approximately 30 distinct wounds, with multiple strikes proving fatal. The medical examiners utilized clinical precision to document the nature of the injuries, noting the use of both serrated and non-serrated blades, which would later become a crucial element of the forensic investigation. Following the attack, the perpetrators did not attempt to provide medical aid or contact authorities. Instead, they fled the scene, leaving Cassie alone in the living room. For 2 days, the house on Whispering Cliffs Drive sat in silence. It was not until Sunday, September 24th, that Cassie's relatives returned from their trip. The scene they encountered was one of profound devastation. Cassie's 13-year-old cousin was the first to discover her. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic blur of grief and confusion. Emergency services were dispatched, but it was abundantly clear that Cassie had passed away long before their arrival. The Pocatello Police Department immediately secured the perimeter, transforming the quiet suburban home into an active crime scene. Investigators arrived to begin the meticulous process of documenting evidence, photographing the area, and searching for any clues that could explain this senseless loss of life. In the initial stages of the investigation, law enforcement officers faced a perplexing scenario. There were no signs of forced entry at the primary doors, and nothing of value had been stolen, effectively ruling out a robbery gone wrong. The violent nature of the crime suggested a personal motive. Detectives naturally focused their attention on those closest to the victim, a standard procedure in homicide investigations. They discovered a fingerprint on the basement circuit breaker door, which initially cast suspicion on a family member. However, this was quickly logically explained by the fact that the family member lived in the home. The focus then shifted to Matt Beckham, the boyfriend and the last known person to see Cassie alive. Matt was subjected to rigorous questioning. He was cooperative, providing a detailed account of the evening, including the visit from Brian and Torey and the strange electrical issues. Matt voluntarily submitted to a polygraph examination which he passed, and his timeline was corroborated by his parents. With Matt cleared of suspicion, the investigative spotlight turned directly toward Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik. Detectives brought the two 16-year-olds in for questioning. In the realm of police procedure, the interrogation of juvenile suspects requires careful navigation of legal rights, but the severity of the crime necessitated a thorough inquiry. Initially, Brian and Torey maintained a unified front. They claimed they had visited Cassie briefly, left to watch a movie called Pulse at a local theater, and then spent the rest of the night at Torey's house. However, experienced investigators know that fabricated alibis often crumble under the weight of specific questions. When detectives pressed the boys for details about the movie they claimed to have seen, their answers were vague and contradictory. They could not accurately describe the plot, the characters, or the theater environment. Recognizing the inconsistencies, law enforcement applied strategic pressure, interviewing the boys separately to prevent them from aligning their stories. The psychological strain of the interrogation soon took its toll. Brian Draper was the first to break. He admitted that their alibi was a lie, but his initial confession was partial and self-serving. He claimed that he and Torey had been in the house, but he attempted to minimize his own involvement, stating that Torey was the primary aggressor and that he had only participated out of fear. Torey, on the other hand, remained stoic, refusing to admit culpability. Despite the shifting narratives, Brian Draper's admissions provided investigators with the breakthrough they desperately needed. On September 27th, just 5 days after the crime, Brian agreed to lead law enforcement to an area known as Black Rock Canyon, located just off Interstate 5. This rugged, isolated terrain served as the disposal site for the physical evidence of their crime. The recovery operation was a masterclass in forensic collection. Investigators unearthed a chilling cache of items that had been partially burned and buried. Among the recovered evidence were latex gloves, dark clothing, a red and white mask, and multiple knives. Specifically, forensic teams cataloged 2 dagger-style knives with sheaths, a silver and black-handled knife with a smooth blade, and a folding survival-style knife with a partially serrated blade. But the most significant discovery at Black Rock Canyon was not a weapon. It was a partially damaged digital videotape. In modern forensic science, digital evidence often provides the most unassailable proof of intent. The videotape recovered from the canyon was carefully analyzed by technical experts. What it contained shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The tape served as a disturbing documentary created by the perpetrators themselves, chronicling their premeditation and their twisted motivations. In the footage, Brian and Torey discussed their fascination with infamous criminals and their desire to emulate the perpetrators of the Columbine High School massacre, as well as the fictional killers from the horror film Scream. They spoke of a death list and explicitly detailed their plan to murder their friends. The recording captured them in the hours leading up to the crime, coldly rationalizing their actions as a path to infamy. Most damning of all, the tape included audio recorded in the immediate aftermath of the event, as they fled the scene, where they explicitly acknowledged what they had just done. This digital record completely dismantled any potential defense of an accidental death or a crime of passion. It established, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the legal requirement for first-degree murder, malice aforethought, and premeditation. Armed with the physical evidence from Black Rock Canyon, the forensic pathology reports, and the devastating videotape, the state of Idaho charged Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Due to the extreme severity of the crime and the clear evidence of sophisticated planning, the decision was made to try the 16-year-olds as adults. This is a significant legal threshold, reflecting the judicial system's assessment that the defendants possessed the cognitive maturity to understand the absolute finality of their actions. The defense teams faced an insurmountable task. The evidence was overwhelming. During the separate trials held in the spring and summer of 2007, the courtroom became a theater of forensic and legal scrutiny. The prosecution meticulously built their case on a foundation of scientific evidence and the defendant's own recorded words. Forensic pathologist Dr. Charles Garrison provided clinical testimony regarding the nature of Cassie's injuries. He detailed the distinct wound patterns, successfully linking the injuries to the specific weapons recovered from Black Rock Canyon. He explained how the non-serrated blade struck the right ventricle of the heart, while other wounds were consistent with the serrated folding knife. This medical testimony was critical in establishing that both weapons were used in the attack, neutralizing any defense strategy that attempted to place the entirety of the physical violence on only one of the boys. The most powerful moment of the trials, however, was the presentation of the videotape to the jury. In a silent courtroom, the jurors watched as the two teenagers casually discussed the logistics of ending a human life. The psychological profile that emerged was one of profound detachment and a dangerous shared delusion, where two individuals reinforce each other's darkest impulses. Mental health professionals and legal analysts have since studied this case as a textbook example of juvenile psychopathy. The dynamics on the tape suggested a complex interplay between the two boys, with Torey often appearing to dominate the conversation, belittling Brian and directing the narrative. Yet, the law does not excuse a participant simply because they claim to be a follower. The legal definition of conspiracy requires only an agreement to commit a crime and an overt act toward its completion. The preparation of the weapons, the unlocking of the basement door, and the manipulation of the power supply were all undeniable overt acts. The juries in both trials deliberated with careful consideration of the facts. On April 17, 2007, Brian Draper was found guilty on all charges. Less than 2 months later, on June 8, Torey Adamcik received the exact same verdict. The sentencing phase brought a stark reality to the courtroom. The judge handed down mandatory sentences of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the first-degree murder convictions, adding an additional 30 years to life for the conspiracy charges. The severity of the sentences reflected the court's determination that the premeditated and thrill-seeking nature of the crime demanded the maximum penalty allowed by law to protect society. In the years following the convictions, the legal process continued through a series of appeals. The defense attorneys for both men argued various points of law, challenging jury instructions, the admissibility of the interrogations without parents present, and the constitutionality of sentencing juveniles to life without parole. The Idaho Supreme Court meticulously reviewed the trial records. While the court did find a minor error in the jury instructions pertaining to Brian Draper's conspiracy charge, leading to its vacatur and remand, the core conviction for first-degree murder and the sentence of life without parole were firmly upheld for both individuals. The appellate courts consistently ruled that the overwhelming evidence of premeditation and the sheer callousness of the act justified the sentences. The impact of Cassie Jo Stoddart's death rippled far beyond the confines of the courtroom, leaving a lasting scar on the community of Pocatello. Small towns rely on a foundation of mutual trust, and this crime shattered that foundation. Parents looked at their children's friends with newfound apprehension. The local school district was forced to grapple with the reality that 2 of their students had plotted a horrific crime within the very halls of their institution. In 2010, the Stoddart family filed a civil lawsuit against the Pocatello School District, arguing that school authorities should have recognized the warning signs and the threat that Draper and Adamcik posed. However, the courts ultimately dismissed the case, ruling that the extreme and deceptive actions of the perpetrators were not reasonably foreseeable by the school staff. The civil suit highlighted a desperate search for accountability in a situation that defied rational understanding. While the legal and investigative details of this case are essential for understanding how justice was served, the true focus must always remain on the life that was lost. Cassie Jo Stoddart was far more than the victim of a notorious crime. She was a daughter, a sister, a niece, and a friend. Her brother, Andrew, has spoken publicly about the profound void her absence left in their family. The trauma of losing a loved one in such a sudden and inexplicable manner is a burden that the family carries every single day. Her mother, her aunt, and her uncle experienced unimaginable grief, forever haunted by the events that unfolded in a home that was supposed to be a sanctuary. Cassie's legacy is preserved in the memories of those who loved her, in her reputation as a kind and responsible young woman who had her entire future ahead of her. The investigation into the death of Cassie Jo Stoddart stands as a testament to the dedication of law enforcement and the undeniable power of forensic science. From the initial securing of the scene to the meticulous recovery of evidence at Black Rock Canyon, every step of the process was crucial in dismantling the lies of the perpetrators. The digital forensics that extracted the chilling confessions from a damaged tape ensured that the truth could not be buried. Yet, even with justice served and the perpetrators permanently removed from society, the resolution offers only a cold comfort against the magnitude of the loss. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the influence of media, the psychology of youth, and the capacity for darkness that can hide behind a familiar face. It challenges us to look closer at the warning signs, to listen more intently to the quiet conversations, and to never take the safety of our communities for granted. As we reflect on the life of Cassie Jo Stoddart and the exhaustive investigative work that brought her killers to justice, we are left to ponder a difficult question. In a world where the desire for infamy can drive individuals to commit the unthinkable, how do we balance the freedom of our culture with the responsibility to protect the innocent from those who cannot separate horrific fiction from tragic reality?